Up next, we have Tony Kroeger. Tony is a maker of maps, a cruncher of numbers, and luckily for us, a presenter of PowerPoints. He is the current acting planning manager for the city of Dayton, a graduate of Clemson and Miami University, Ohio, an inventor of the wheel and fire.
I didn't think you were going to say that. Yeah, I did.
Oh, I said it. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you.
So we start slide number one with Public Enemy number one. He was captured in Dayton in 1933 on West 1st Street in Dayton, Ohio. Within a year, he was transferred to Allen County, escaped from Allen County, robbed a bunch of banks, and was shot by the FBI, John Dillinger, but he never escaped from Dayton, just like all of us. No, I love Dayton, just a joke. L.L. Langstroth is known as the father of modern day beekeeping. Unfortunately, he died in Dayton, Ohio at the corner of Park and Wayne Avenues, where one parks for South Park Tavern. He died at a church that was at that location while at the pulpit giving a sermon about the love of God. 60 years ago, almost to the day, a B-26 bomber crashed in Dayton, Ohio on Tuttle Avenue, just off of Smithville. 4 people were killed, 2 people in the plane, 1 person that was just chilling in their house, and 1 person that was cutting the grass. This was 60 years ago. It was a real tragedy. It was just off of Smithville, north of where Kroeger is. And this map kind of shows where the impact occurred. The highlighted parcels show the only 3 parcels. Well, one's vacant, and then the 2 houses that were built after 1957. So one can easily see just by looking at a map where the B-26 crashed on Tuttle Avenue. Now there's a hidden potter's field at Woodland Cemetery that some of you may know about. It's just north of the ball fields, just north of Irving Avenue. We've only seen this one indication that it's even there, this one stone, if it's even that. But the most important thing about this site is that that's probably where they're going to dump my ass when I die, broken poor. The great thing about this particular slide is that it shows a historic marker that in and of itself is historic. It signifies Hull's Rendezvous, where General William Hull gathered the troops in Dayton, Ohio, just north of the Mad River, where they made their way through the Ohio Territory to the Fort of Detroit. At the Fort of Detroit, they were sieged. General William Hull very much failed. He was sentenced to be shot to death for his cowardice and incompetence. Luckily, Madison pardoned him and saved him, but the beginning and the end for Hull was in Dayton, Ohio. Now, there's a lot of great flood stories, 1913 flood stories here in Dayton. One of the more interesting ones is that the NCR provided the flood morgue. This location is just adjacent to where Dayton Daily News headquarters is today. It's a pretty chilling picture showing the bodies lined up and their belongings there as well. Now, on a brighter note, Longfellow's School on Salem Avenue was a Red Cross station. 500 people spent 2 weeks there, getting 3 meals a day at Longfellow's School, and it was really the sanctuary for flood victims in Dayton, Ohio, and that building still exists today. Speaking of flood heroes, David Chambers lived in the Riverdale area. He, subsequent of the flood, took his boat to the downtown area, saved 150 people after the flood occurred and during the flood. Unfortunately, his boat eventually got knocked over by driftwood and he succumbed to the flood himself. We have a pretty amazing late woodland period sacred ground National Register site in Dayton, and it's not Sunwatch, it's called Licklider Mound. It's on the National Register. It's out off of Little Richmond and Olive Road, and it's actually one of the most well-excavated sites in the entire North American area. So if you check that out on the National Register. When the Navy needed somebody to crack the German four-rotor Enigma machine, they looked to NCR and Joe Desch. He did his work at Building 26 at Stewart and Patterson, where he did the work that shortened the time of the war. Interestingly enough, he lived in Oakwood. He lived on Greenmont. This is a picture of his house. It was a 2-bedroom house. He, of course, slept in one of them. Commander Meader, who was kind of Desch's caretaker, slept in the other bedroom. And very important Navy generals slept on the floor in this house in Oakwood. Now, speaking of the war, the Dayton Project was part of the Manhattan Project. The trigger for the atomic bomb was developed here in Dayton. This shows the Central Command location, which is just off of Nicholas Road in Dayton, Ohio, kind of the extension of Edwin C. There was a whole compound of buildings there off of Nicholas Road that are grass lot today. Speaking of the Dayton Project, which again developed the polonium trigger for the atomic bomb, in West Dayton, many of the buildings are still there. That was really the laboratory that developed polonium. This is off of Dakota Street in West Dayton. It shows the laboratory that did the major work that really saved a lot of American lives. Out there today, you can kind of see basically the historic map of what was there when such important work was being undertaken, and the current conditions on the right today. And this is just sitting out there for us all to learn about in the Wolf Creek neighborhood in Dayton, Ohio. 601 East 3rd Street, this is like a block from here, is where they stored and did testing on the biological samples of those that were working on the polonium, that were working on the trigger for the atomic bomb. This is like a block away on Sears and 3rd Street. The building's still there today. By the way, the city of Dayton owns it, and it's gotten, I promise, a clean bill of health from the EPA. So if anybody wants to make those into apartments, just come let me know, and we can make that work, I'm sure. It's an amazing experience to go through the building, honestly. It's such a historic building that played an important role in the Manhattan Project, and it's just down the street from where we're at right now. George Koval was a Russian spy, and speaking of polonium, in Dayton, Ohio is where this Russian spy, George Koval, really got the secrets that advanced Russia's nuclear program several years. He lived on Grand Avenue in the Dayton View neighborhood, just off of Salem. Here's earlier pictures of him. And he is now celebrated by Putin and others for his work as a spy in Dayton, Ohio. And it all comes back to the work that happened here for the trigger for the atomic bomb. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.